In the wild heart of the Old West, a poor widow and her 2 children rescue a dying cowboy, unaware that he's a rich man whose return will forever change their fate. Broken Heart sheaf of rice. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and tell us, where are you watching from? Let's get started. Cowboy hat face fire. The wind howled through the desolate plains of Montana that night, dragging cold dust across the horizon. The sky was split open by lightning, and rain came down like bullets. In the distance, a horse stumbled, half dead from exhaustion, dragging behind it a man covered in blood. His shirt, once white, was soaked deep crimson. He could barely hold the reins. His breath came in shallow gasps. Every drop of rain seemed to sting his wounds like fire. The man was Ethan Cole, once the richest rancher in the Western Territory. But tonight, that didn't matter. His money couldn't stop the pain in his ribs or the lead buried in his shoulder. He had been ambushed, by men he trusted, men who wanted his land, his cattle, his life. They left him for dead somewhere near the Devil's Ridge. He didn't know how far he'd ridden. He didn't even know if his horse still had a soul left to carry him. But through the blur of blood and rain, he saw a flicker of light, a cabin's window, faint and trembling in the storm. He fell off his horse before he could reach the door. Inside that small, worn-down cabin lived Clara Dawson, a widow with 2 young children, Tommy, 12, and Lila, barely 8. Life hadn't been kind to Clara. Her husband, a miner, had died in an accident 2 winters ago, leaving her with nothing but debts and a few acres of unforgiving land. Every day was a fight to survive, selling milk, gathering firewood, stitching clothes for strangers. That night, when she heard the sound of a horse collapsing outside, she froze. In these parts, folks didn't come visiting after dark, unless trouble followed. Still, something inside her, a flicker of decency, maybe faith, pushed her to open that door. And there he was. A man, pale as death, lying in the mud. She gasped, dropping her lantern. "Dear Lord," she whispered, rushing forward. Tommy came running behind her with a rifle in hand. "Ma, don't. He could be dangerous." But Clara was already kneeling beside the stranger. "He's bleeding bad," she said, her fingers trembling as she touched his cold face. "Help me get him inside." It took all their strength to drag him onto the table near the fire. Blood dripped onto the wooden floorboards, pooling beneath him. Lila started crying softly. "Ma, is he gonna die?" Clara pressed her lips tight. "Not if I can help it." She boiled water, tore an old sheet for bandages, and did what she could. She had no medical training, but years of hardship had taught her survival. She cleaned the wound, whispered prayers, and stitched the torn flesh while the storm roared outside. Hours passed. The man's breathing steadied, though faintly. Clara finally sat down beside him, exhaustion pulling at her bones. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the land washed but broken. When Ethan opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was sunlight streaming through cracked window panes. The second thing he saw was a little girl staring at him with wide blue eyes. "You're awake," Lila whispered, holding a cup of water. He tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. "Where am I?" "Home," she said simply. "Mama says you got shot." Ethan tried to sit up, wincing. Pain ripped through his shoulder. "Your Mama?" "I'm Clara Dawson," said a soft voice from the corner. She stepped forward, her face tired but kind. "You were half dead outside my door last night. You're lucky my boy didn't shoot you." Ethan gave a faint smile. "Maybe he should've." She frowned. "Don't say that. You're alive, and that's something." Days passed. Ethan stayed in the cabin, too weak to leave. Clara fed him what little she had, thin soup, hard bread, sometimes just boiled water flavored with salt. She asked no questions about who he was, and he offered no answers. But slowly, he began to see the truth of her life, the patched roof, the cracked dishes, the way her hands bled from work. One evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, Ethan watched Tommy struggling to split logs outside. The boy's axe was dull, his hands raw. "You're swinging wrong," Ethan called weakly. Tommy looked up, frowning. "And what would you know, mister?" Ethan grinned faintly. "A thing or two about hard work." Despite his injuries, he managed to get up, take the axe, and show the boy how to use his shoulders instead of his wrists. When the log split cleanly in half, Tommy's eyes widened. "You sure don't look like a man who knows about chopping wood." "I've known more than I care to remember," Ethan said quietly. From that day on, he helped where he could. He mended the fence, taught Tommy how to care for horses, told Lila bedtime stories about the stars. Clara tried to keep her distance, but she couldn't help noticing the way the children laughed again, the way the cabin didn't feel so heavy anymore. Still, something about Ethan didn't fit. His hands, though scarred, were too soft for a ranch hand. His voice had the weight of command. And one night, as she cleaned his bandages, a gold signet ring slipped from his finger. It bore the initials EC. She stared at it. "You're not just some drifter, are you?" Ethan looked at her for a long time before answering. "No, ma'am. I'm Ethan Cole. Cole Ranch, 30 miles west." Her eyes widened. "Cole Ranch? That's one of the biggest in the territory," he finished. "Was. Till someone decided they wanted it more." "Who?" "Men I trusted. My foreman, a banker, maybe even my lawyer. They forged papers, framed me for theft, and when I came to confront them, they shot me and left me for dead." Clara sat silent. Outside, the wind whistled through the trees. "So you're a rich man who lost everything." Ethan chuckled bitterly. "Guess that makes me just a man now." Weeks passed. Winter crept in, coating the land in frost. Ethan regained his strength. But the more he healed, the heavier his heart grew. He had lost his home, his fortune, and his name. Yet here, in a small cabin with a poor widow and her children, he had found something he never knew he needed: peace. One night, sitting by the fire, Clara asked softly, "What will you do when you're strong enough?" He stared into the flames. "Go back. Take back what's mine." "And after that?" He didn't answer. That silence told her everything. When the first snow fell, Ethan knew it was time. He saddled his horse, the same loyal creature that had carried him through death's door. Clara stood by the doorway, her shawl wrapped tight around her. "You don't have to go alone," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "I've been alone most of my life, Clara. But thank you for reminding me what kindness looks like." Tommy ran out and handed him a small knife. "For luck." Lila hugged his leg, tears in her eyes. "Will you come back?" Ethan looked down, his throat tight. "If I can." Then he rode off into the white horizon. Weeks turned into months. The Dawsons heard rumors, about gunfights near Cole Ranch, about a man reclaiming his land from thieves. But no one ever mentioned Ethan by name. Clara tried not to hope, but every night she found herself looking toward the hills, half expecting to see that horse again. Then, one spring morning, a wagon appeared on the horizon. Tommy saw it first. "Ma! Someone's comin'." The wagon rolled up slowly, led by two fine black horses. The driver wore a dark coat and a familiar hat. Clara froze. "Ethan." He stepped down, smiling, healthier than she'd ever seen him. His clothes were clean, his boots polished. Behind him, the wagon brimmed with crates, flour, sugar, fabric, tools, and more. "Figured you folks could use a little help," he said casually. Lila screamed with joy, running into his arms. Tommy grinned, though he tried to hide it. Clara stood still, her heart pounding. You came back. Told you I would. She blinked back tears. I heard you won back your ranch. Yeah, he said quietly. And I realized all that gold and land didn't mean a thing if I didn't have someone to share it with. He stepped closer, his eyes soft. Clara. I owe you my life. And I don't mean just patching me up. You and your kids gave me something no doctor or banker ever could, a reason to keep living. Clara looked away, her voice trembling. We didn't do it for reward. I know. That's why it means everything. He opened one of the crates and handed her a folded paper. This is a deed. A piece of land, 20 acres, right by the river. Yours. She stared at it in disbelief. Ethan, I can't. You can. And you will. Consider it, my way of saying thank you. She shook her head. We don't need charity. He smiled softly. Good. 'Cause it ain't charity. It's partnership. I was hoping maybe, you'd come live near the ranch. Help me rebuild it. I could use someone who knows what real strength looks like. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind. Then Clara whispered, You're serious? I've never been more. Tommy's eyes lit up. You mean we'd have horses? Real ones? Ethan chuckled. You'd have the best. Lila clapped her hands. And we'd live near Mr. Ethan. Clara's heart swelled. She looked at the man who had once been a stranger bleeding on her doorstep, now standing strong, humble, and full of life. She nodded slowly. All right. We'll come. Ethan's smile could have warmed the whole prairie. That summer, the Dawsons moved into their new home, a cozy cabin beside a clear river, with green fields stretching as far as the eye could see. Tommy helped on the ranch, learning to rope and ride. Lila played with the foals. Clara planted a garden, her hands no longer trembling with worry. Ethan visited often, bringing laughter and stories. But it wasn't long before folks started whispering that the rich cowboy and the widow were more than just friends. And one evening, under a sky painted gold and pink, Ethan came riding up with a single white rose. He dismounted slowly, walked to her garden, and said, I ain't good with fancy words, Clara. But if you'll have me, I'd like to spend whatever's left of my life beside you. Tears welled in her eyes. Ethan, you already are. He smiled. Then let's make it official. They married in a small church on the hill, with Tommy and Lila standing proudly beside them. It wasn't a grand wedding, but it was real, the kind built from shared struggle and quiet love. Years later, when people spoke of Ethan Cole, they didn't talk about his wealth or his land. They talked about how a poor widow saved a dying man, and how that man repaid her, not with gold, but with his heart. And every evening, when the sun dipped low over the ranch, Clara would sit on the porch beside Ethan, watching their children play in the fields, and whisper, funny thing, how one storm can change everything. Ethan would take her hand and smile. Guess God knew where to send me. And in that silence, their laughter, the wind, the fading light, you could still feel the heartbeat of the West, where kindness was rarer than gold, and love, stronger than fate.